Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to show you some tips about doing the two-slit interference lab. So first of all, I've got my laser here connected, plugged in, and I set it up on a couple of books on a chair just so that the height would be about right to put my comb so that the laser goes through the comb. And I'm using the fine teeth side of the comb. The coarse side doesn't work so well. So I've set it up so the laser goes through there. And also what you want to do is remember that you can turn the little front part of the laser and there's a lens and it'll focus. So what I did is I turned that until looking at the wall down the hall, I got a nice small dot instead of a wide beam. And you also want to sort of adjust it so that the laser is going to hit a spot on the wall where you like it, where you can put your screen. Before you put your comb, it's an easy way to point the laser, make sure it's pointing where you want it. And then I'm going to put my fine teeth comb in front of it. And then I'm going to go over and look and see what it looks like on the wall. Let's go over there. And, okay, here's what I'm getting on the wall here. I got this nice pattern. What I would do is tape a piece of paper onto the wall so I can draw on there. And if I zoom in, you can see there's all these little fringes. Probably some mysterious stuff and some stuff that you learned about in class, and that's all good. What you might be asking yourself is, all these little lines, isn't that just the shadow of the comb's teeth? How do I know this is interference and not just the lasers shining through a bunch of teeth? And that's what this is. This is just the shadow of all the teeth. And if you're asking yourself that, that's a very good question. So how could we answer that question? How could we decide whether this is really an interference pattern or is it just a bunch of shadow of comb teeth? So think about that for a second, maybe even pause the video and see if you can come up with an idea before looking at what I did to solve that problem. Okay, did you pause the video and decide? So here we have a bunch of teeth, and maybe you just thought, well, what we saw on the wall was just the shadow of all those teeth. Why should I believe you that that's an interference pattern and not just a bunch of shadows? Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paper and fold it in half and put it over the comb teeth like that. So instead of having multiple teeth, I'm only going to get 2 slits for sure instead of lots and lots of little slits. And that way, if I still get a lot of lines on the screen, I'm more convinced that it's an interference pattern and not just shadows. What did you think? What was your solution? I hope you thought of something. Okay, so now I'm going to put that there. And now the light can only go through 2 slits and it can't go through. So now let's go look and see what the pattern we get once we've blocked off all these other teeth. Okay, we're back, and here's the pattern we get now on the wall. Having blocked off most of the teeth with the paper so that the light is only going through 2 slits, and we still get all these little fringes. So the idea that these are just shadows of the teeth doesn't really hold up anymore. And we're going to go ahead and go with that. This is double slit interference pattern. Yay. Okay, so you're going to I recommend you put a piece of paper on the wall and you draw this pattern. There's going to be some noisy, weird stuff that is just from reflections and noise. And part of the job of doing experiments is always being able to decide what's the interesting stuff here and what's just a bunch of noise that I don't have to worry about. And that's not always obvious, but you'll get better and better at it as you do stuff. And anyway, here we're going to draw the pattern, and the most important thing I think I would draw is the spacing between these fringes and measure that. And so that's one of your main measurements. And you don't have to measure the space between 2 adjacent fringes. You can measure like how far are 10 fringes apart or however many you can count. Right? The more you count, the more accurate your measurement will probably be, and just use m in your equation for whatever. However, if you count, between the 0 and the 10th fringe, you can say m equals 10. If you count between the 0 and the 6th fringe, you can say m equals 6. But wait, you say, how do I know which one is the 0 one? Because the ones in the center are all kind of bright. It's not quite obvious which one the center one is. And you can get around that by looking and noticing that they're all about the same distance apart. So it doesn't really matter which one you call the center one, as long as you measure the spacing for about, if I measure 10 fringes, it doesn't matter if I go to 0 or 10, I can go to 1 to 11, it'll be the same distance. So you don't have to worry exactly which one the center one is. Do remember that you're counting gaps. So if I count from one fringe to the next fringe, that's not two fringes, that's one gap, one space, right? Okay, so you're going to measure that distance for whatever m that you're using. You're going to measure the distance between the comb and the screen. That's your big D. And then we have to measure the distance between the teeth on the comb. That's going to be a tricky one. Okay, so now you have to measure the distance between the slits. And that's a kind of tricky one because they're really small. So my suggestion, and you can think of a one if you like a different one, and I encourage you to think of your own, but here's my suggestion is I'm taking a picture, maybe use your cell phone, take a picture of the teeth next to a ruler like this, and try to measure the distance between the centers of two slits. But since they're so small, it's pretty hard to try to measure just from one to the next. So a better way to do it would be, say, how many do 10 take up or 20 take up, and then divide by 20. You could try to find find a tooth that lines right up with a centimeter mark, and maybe count how many teeth you go until you line up with the next centimeter marker. You'll figure it out, but find a good accurate way to measure a bunch of teeth and then divide by that number of teeth. And again, remember you're measuring spaces and not teeth. So 3 teeth is 2 spaces. And then also, of course, like always, estimate your uncertainty. How much? So if I say, I've got 20 teeth and 2 centimeters, is that plus or minus 1 tooth or plus or minus a half a tooth? Try to get your plus or minus in there and include that. And so you'll do that. So you'll have, you'll have this measurement for your slit spacing, and you'll have your measurement for your space between the comb and the wall with that uncertainty, and you'll have your measurement of the spacing between the fringes on the wall with that plus or minus also. And like we do, you can figure out which of those uncertainties is the limiting factor, which one has the biggest percent uncertainty.